people stand up to go speak and say whatever it is that they need to say, they'll just come to this spot, and we'll have a camera fixed on it. So, and this feed goes straight, the audio feed goes straight into the Facebook Live, and the media is going to pull that. So it'll be a camera angle zoomed in tight on you, and you'll have an audio feed clear. So,
Mask on at all times?
what I'm saying about the mask is let's let people choose when they speak. I mean, sit and yell, let's keep mask on, but like when you go to speak, let's let that be personal expression unless anybody has an objection to that.
Right.
My only thing is let's try not to touch the microphone. That would be my only recommendation. Does that work for everybody? All right, perfect. And y'all can move. There are seats closer to the front, and I can help y'all find some.
There's usually 2 seats between us.
Oh man, I appreciate that. I was about to say, oh yeah.
Church, we had to put out road things. People like that, that goes out the way. So that's a good idea.
I ain't going nowhere.
I understand you apologize.
I do. I said it yesterday. I said he'll apologize within the next 3 days. His next document is going to be an apology of every time. Yeah, I do. We had a good chat over there. What kind of Nah, you good.
I'm glad y'all started. So it's another one to join Sunday. It's another one to join Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Let me sit down. We'll talk. Just going down this.
Camera shot. That's great.
Quiet.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, explain this to a couple people. My name's Ben Riggs, I'm Mayor's Communications Director, if I haven't met you. The way that the camera feeds and the mics are gonna work this morning is, the mayor will have a mic up here.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's a microphone positioned over here for anyone in the audience, whenever you get ready to make comments, you can come to this microphone here. It's up to you whether you wanna leave your mask on while you're speaking. Request that you don't touch the mic, just to prevent, I guess, people feeling uncomfortable with touching it. And then, the camera angle will zoom in tight on this microphone, and that feed will go both to Facebook and then the media will it as well. And then afterwards, if anyone is interested, the media's already asked me, if I'll make people available. We'll do some brief comments, the mayor will, the media afterwards, and then if any of y'all are willing to do it, I can help facilitate that as well. You good?
Yeah.
Let me go that point, then we can go out.
Okay. Is somebody gonna come and tell me when we?
I will.
Okay. Yes. This is already talking about. Yeah, but it was a different rule. Yeah, different way. Go outside, shake your hand, people other people do the same thing.
About 5 seconds.
All right, I want to thank y'all so much for coming out to this town hall. We have been, looking around our community and around the country, and we have seen some troubling things. We are very much in some unprecedented times. I prided myself since elected to make sure that I stay as close with the people of Shreveport as possible. And when we get into these times that are unprecedented, and we understand from a very humble position that we don't have all the answers, that we work as a silo here from City Hall, that we need you. So super happy that you all came out to share your thoughts, ask questions, and really push the conversation forward. Sadly, this is the second town hall I had, and the first town hall was about an officer-involved shooting. This second town hall, we're gonna talk about law enforcement today. We're gonna talk about police brutality and recommendations and feedback on what we can do to push the envelope even further. Things that we've already done. I talked about race very early on in my administration, and because of things that I saw early on, we decided to have a commission on race. It took us some time to stand up that commission because of COVID-19. We could not foresee that we'd be going through a global pandemic that would change our lives and livelihoods. So it pushed it back, but we do have that commission stood up now. We have 26 members on that commission, various, diverse backgrounds from every corner of the city, and I'm very proud of that commission. And we have two of the advisors here today. We have Mr. John Ratcliffe and we have Pastor Brian Wilson. Also, the entities represented here today, we have the African American Chamber of Commerce that is here. We have pastors that are here. We have Pastor Darren Jackson from Morning Star Baptist Church. And we also have elected officials. We have Lynn Cawthorn from the Cattle Commission here. And Strategic Action Council, we have Taylor Jamison. So I'm very, very grateful for each and every one of you. But again, we don't have all the answers, so I want to just open it up for questions, comments, so we can have this conversation. Any brave souls want to go? Okay, John, lead the way.
I'm John Ratcliffe, and I am one of the co-something or others on the Commission on Race, co-chairs, I guess you might call it, but we're trying to be as informal about that, as flexible as we can be. The things that we're looking at, we started, I started thinking about, after the mayor made the call for Commission on Race, I started thinking about that back in November and December of last year, and as he said, we've been interrupted by a pandemic. But I started thinking, along with Amari Hussain, she and I, and Adrian Pritchard, who was on the Mayor's Advisory Committee, for this, we got together and just brainstormed some ideas. And out of that came, and this, let me just caution quickly, this is by no means the end of what we're going to be doing. This, what I will mention today will evolve, and we will have things that will be added to this list. And one of the things, I'm a facilitator for Dialogue on Race here in Shreveport, and it's an effective means for, and I'm concerned a lot with the relationship, well, the understanding that white folks like myself have of the lived experience in the black community, which is not the same as mine, and not the same as most white folks. And Dialogue on Race is the most effective thing that I've found, and I've been kind of fooling with this, as well as I can for about 50 years, and looking for some answers. And this is a very impactful and important way, just to have difficult conversations that normally don't take place really much anywhere, and certainly don't take place much in the white community, and probably less even take place between the black community and the white community. This provides an opportunity for that. Three key concepts that are brought out, and this is not nearly all that comes out in Dialogue on Race, but three concepts are institutional racism as opposed to personal prejudice. It's not that personal prejudice isn't important, and it certainly can be in a particular situation, but it's very important to look and see how our institutions play a role in the racism that we see. And then the second thing is white privilege, and the awareness that there is such a thing, and the understanding of what can be done about that. And my slogan for myself is that I had done, well, the preamble of the slogan is that I didn't create white privilege. I was born into white privilege. And the question that I ask myself is, since I'm privileged, what do I do? And what I need to do, and what I've tried to do for a long time, and what Dialogue on Race helps people do, is to understand that you can use that privilege to work toward a world in which there's nothing like that. The third thing is the importance, and this will actually be done in a dialogue on race series. An important thing that also is that white folks, it's very critical that white folks actually listen, genuinely listen to black folks, and not just the mayor, not just a minister, but what black folks are trying to say, what they in fact are very effectively saying. And do not discount what they say just because we can, because we're white, or because they're black. And so that's a key thing. And I'm going to try to get finished in a hurry with the rest of it, but two other things. So what we want to do is promote that citywide, which is something we think would be important to have police officers go through. There's in fact a specific series that's been developed for police officers, and I should mention Maxine Crump started this down in Baton Rouge about 20 years ago, and she's certainly prepared to help us in any way she can. I talked to her yesterday. The other two things, or three things really, one is that we want to put together a database that makes it a one-stop shop for any statistics anybody wants on the disparities between whites and blacks, whether it's health care, arrests, convictions, access to food, real estate, whatever's left of redlining. And then the second database would be sort of essay by essay, creating an accurate history of race relations in Shreveport and Caddo Parish, including Reconstruction and continuing up till today. And so, because there's a lot of misunderstanding about how we got to where we are, which should be exhibited in the statistical database. The other thing, we've done one of these, and it was when the mayoral race took place, we had a question and answer situation with the candidates. It was called Race in the City. And we thought that was very effective. We think that ought to be, a forum like that ought to take place in virtually every election of any public official that takes place in Caddo. Now these are big, big things. And we don't expect that we're going to have these done in 2 months, probably even 6 months. But these are things that can continue for a long time. And this is the foundation for what I think the commission is trying to do. And however, and I think it's important to also add that there are two key issues which Mayor Perkins has already mentioned. One is police brutality, or as I like to say, police misconduct of any kind, and correct that, and of course correct it when it involves the death of somebody, and to work on that, and we will be doing that. And the other thing is to understand health care as it's been revealed to us in the coronavirus pandemic, which has impacted the black community significantly more than it has impacted the white community. And with that, I will yield the rest of my time.
Thank you.
So just a simple question. What is the city doing to actively make sure that nothing else happens when it comes to the death of Mr. George? Like, what is the city doing to actively make sure that that does not happen in Shreveport?
Yeah, so what we're doing is right now, well, first of all, I'll just say I'm confident that I've very much set up a culture with our police officers to be respectable to our citizens. When I first, even running for office, when I did the interviews that John just talked about, I talked about community-oriented policing. Our police officers respecting our citizens and taking more of a guardian mindset than a military type of mindset when engaging our citizens. So off the top, you gotta have that attitude of serving and protecting rather than, hey, I'm going out there to hurt somebody and inflict pain. So I'd say just first of all, we have that philosophy, and we've been very much letting our officers know that's the direction the department is going in. In addition to that though, right now we're working with city council, we're working also with the federal government to try to get funding to get body cameras. So with body cameras though, I want to be clear, there's a lot of studies that show, hey, body cameras don't necessarily reduce, excessive force incidents. But with strong policies around body cameras, you can reduce excessive force incidents. Making sure that your officers have them turned on when they're out, making sure they're reporting whenever there is issues when they're out. and various things. How do you store data? How do you store data? How do you protect people's privacy? A bunch of other things that can make the body cameras very, very effective. So we'll make sure that we, not only do we acquire the body cameras, but we'll make sure that there's policies attached that again are going to keep our officers safe and our citizens safe as they go out and interact with one another.
Sure.
So yeah, so that's two quick things that we're doing to make sure we keep the citizens safe of Shreveport.
And one more question. It has been documented over the past 5 years that the city of Shreveport has used excessive force over the years with through the SPD. Is SPD open to changing some of the policies for excessive use of force?
Yeah, 100%. And we'll make our use of force policy public, and again take feedback on that. I think if anything, I'll say, and I don't want to say the George Floyd incident has encouraged us to even make that public and take feedback. Mm-hmm. Even before that, we know how careful we have to be with the use of force. And I'll say, if you look at the track record since I've been in office with any excessive force incidents, watch the entire process. And that's another part I talked about on the news the other day. Watch the entire process, because we'll pay attention to the first incident when it comes on the news, but civil service laws, which are state laws, mandate that an investigation has to take place afterwards. An investigation that can take anywhere from 45 to 60 days. So because, if that officer is put on administrative leave and it's paid, which is also a state law, it has to be paid to a certain extent, and then you can put them on unpaid administrative leave. People just watching the first steps think that is all that took place, and they are disappointed with the system. If you continue to watch the process, we have had to terminate officers for using excessive force in this administration.
Right.
So the you're talking about, it goes back 5 years, 10 years, absolutely. And if you look at it, it's extremely troubling about some of the officers that were reinstated to their jobs if you look back at the record over 20 years. So I would encourage people to very much do that. But again, I'm very confident in my administration that we have been doing the right things with those excessive force incidents, staying within the law and making sure that we maintain that culture within the police department to serve and protect.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Brian Wilson. I'm the pastor of Galilee Baptist Church, but even more than that, I'm a human being. And so that's who I represent this morning. I represent humanity. And just to piggyback on my brother's response or question that came forth, and I see what we're here for. And I think we also have our own local situation going on with, I believe, Tommy McLaughlin and Wavy Austin, which are two individuals who died in police custody. Where are we with that? Because I know in one situation from a news standpoint, and because I'm on the commission, I recognize that I represent people. And that's one of the outcries that I hear from people is where are we with that? And how do we as citizens follow that process and ensure that that does not get in the cracks? Because we see that these things can happen, right? That some of these things that we even know about nationally are only because of social media and the power of social media. If social media never brings these things to light, perhaps they get swept under. How do we stay connected as citizens to the process?
I would very much say, like I said, educate yourselves on the timelines of these incidents when they happen and on the various offices that deal with these incidents. So right now, people are, we've had 2 in custody deaths over the last 70 or so days here in Shreveport. So whenever any of that happens, there's immediately an investigation that takes place. And with that investigation on the event surrounding that particular person's death, you have any video footage that's available, any eyewitness accounts that's available, various things go into it. But also, in addition to that, is a coroner's report. So SPD or SFD or whoever is involved hands over every bit of information that they have to the DA's office after that coroner's report is complete with it attached. The DA office will sometimes ask, hey, this document wasn't attached, or this document wasn't attached, and they'll ask for additional information. And then they'll look through all the information, and then they'll make a ruling on whether or not it was negligent or whether or not it was of natural causes. you name it. But there's 3 different entities, elected entities, that go through that process, and it takes some time. So again, educate yourself on the actual timeline and the entities that touch that process, and hold each one of them accountable. If there's anything that's fishy or out of place with any particular thing, absolutely ask questions and get to the bottom of it. What we saw in Minnesota was the coroner put out a report that said that somebody, we watched on TV that died of natural causes. Then they did an independent autopsy and found something very different. So again, each one of our governmental entities should be held accountable. And I talk about this often. A lot of times, again, we're attracted to that shiny ball that's in the front, and we put all the onus on that particular spot. But we got to know where to apply pressure throughout the system.
So who would we go to? And this is just education for all of us, including myself. So who do we go to with our disdain?
Yeah, well, the people who work for you, me, right? I work for you. The coroner works for you. That's an elected office, and the DA works for you. So go to the people that work for you and ask them questions about the process. I've been very clear with SPD, my city attorney's office. I've even spoken to the DA. Hey, we need to be 100% transparent with anything that comes, out of the city of Shreveport.
Thank you, man.
No more. So I was about to say, we got some smart people in the room. Don't be shy.
I'll take this off so my glasses don't keep fogging up. I'm John Henson. I'm pastor of Church for the Highlands and also on the Race Commission. Thank you, Mayor, for having this and giving us an opportunity to talk about this. President Obama called on mayors, I guess yesterday it was, to review use of force policies to pursue an 8-point slate of police reforms. So they included, I don't know if I got all 8, but mandatory de-escalation of conflicts, which you just were talking about, a ban on shooting at moving vehicles, timely reporting of violent incidents, and prohibitions on some forms of resistant force used by police. And I was just curious, what steps are already in place for those? And for those that have not really been addressed, what do you anticipate being done for those in the days ahead?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up. Not only have a bunch of mayors been sharing Obama's challenge to us with me, but also my staff has already been talking about it, and we're already looking into, hey, what measures can we put in place? I said in the press conference last week, 2 things that I'm challenging the Commission on Race to look at is, the first was the disparity in healthcare that we just saw the effects of that through COVID-19, and the second is looking at our the law enforcement kind of civil divide. But with it, the use of force policy, instead of creating a community commission to look at that's happening in other communities, we already have the commission to do so. So I'll provide the commission with the use of force policy, and again, ask them for recommendations, as I've asked the crowd to, hey, as we make it public, we'll take input from the community. The police force is there for the community, so it pains me when there's this sense of a gap between the two. So as close as we can get them together, I think the safer that we're going to be and the more trust is going to be built. In addition to that, you talked about officers not being able to fire at moving cars, et cetera, et cetera. We already have a lot of those policies in place, including our chase policies. Once police officers are in pursuit of a suspect that gets into a crowded area in Shreveport, they have to stop. The incident that we had in Shreveport this particular year actually was a Bossier officer that was in Shreveport that was chasing somebody and got in a car wreck and almost killed multiple. Actually, some people did die in the car accident. More almost died, so it was extremely dangerous. So we have some things on the books already. Can we go further? Absolutely, and we want to go further.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm definitely interested in seeing white leaders, clergy, residents work on the racial problems in our city. I think that's something that a lot of people in our community are thinking about, and I think there's been some progress that's been made in terms of awareness of what these community issues are, especially in terms of policing, and whether it's just ignorance or just turning an eye to what's going on in the community and not listening to what's taking place. So I'm interested, and that's one thing I would love to see as a part of that race commission, is so that we can come out of that with some tools and some ways of being able to address and make some changes, some concrete changes, to move beyond just people protesting, which I think is great and very necessary, and obviously it's made a huge difference in cities all across the nation. But to get beyond that, to make some real changes, to really address the problems that exist in our communities, especially in our own community here. And so what are some ways that that you see that happening in terms of moving beyond this, let's say a month from now, or maybe even sooner, to where we can use this momentum to make some real changes in things that are problematic in our community in terms of race?
Yeah, I think honestly the first thing that you said was fantastic, and if we can get some movement there, it would be great. There is probably a handful of white clergy that talks about these issues on Sunday. It's the saying in Shreveport, the most segregated day in Shreveport is on Sundays. And most leaders are going to talk to their audience about what they feel pertains to them. Unfortunately, a lot of white clergy don't talk about issues that are impacting the black community disproportionately to their audience. And I think, if anything, that the events have revealed over the last week is that we need to all be having this conversation. And we need you just as much as we need black clergy to talk about it. I've been going to a black church since I was born, and that's always been the conversation. They're always talking about social issues, social ailments within the black community. So yeah, if our entire community is going to get it, we very much need to be in lockstep, no matter what color the pastor, preacher, or bishop is. So if we could get more involvement there, that would be great. And as a matter of fact, I think a great step going forward from here, some of the demonstrators are going to go out this Saturday, and they want to have a vigil tomorrow. I talked to Omari about this. They want to have a vigil tomorrow. I'm not sure the location, maybe here, but they would love for all the pastors in the community to come out and pray over the demonstrators. Pray over their protection. These are some brave souls. These are people like threatening their lives for going out and doing demonstrations right now. So I mean, how much of a humane act is that? Is just come out and pray for people. And that's all that they're acting. And I think things like that, symbols like that, you send out to the community, would go a very long way in reconciling that.
Thank you.
Morning, Mayor.
Morning.
My name is Betsy Vallette. I'm with NAACP. And I came down to discuss some things about what's going on with our young black people in this city. And I wish I knew the solution to the problem of all this killing our young black men. And I reached out to some of my family members and some friends for their suggestions. And I just written some of them down. One young man said maybe the parents of our young people are not aware of the organizations that we have here in this city to keep them busy, keep them off the street. If they don't know it, I know everybody, they suggested, well, maybe we should reach out more in social media. Most all the young people have phones and they know Facebook, and maybe we can get through them that way. And then another friend said, home training. How do we reach the parent and get them more involved in their children's lives? See, the training starts at home, and when they don't have a parent there, they're raising themselves, and that leads to destruction. And church involvement. I know we have pastors already out there doing street ministry, and we suggest that maybe more pastors need to go out and do street ministry in the community where their church is. And reaching out, and one suggested, maybe we should reach out to each community and recruit the most popular young man or woman and have a dialogue with them to find out what is really in their heads. Some people just want to be heard. Some people want to be shown love. And maybe that's what we need to do. There is something, as a people here in Shreveport, I believe in prayer, but there's something that's not being done. It's something we haven't done. I believe in prayer, I believe in God, and we got to continue to pray because we can't continue to lose our children at the rate we're losing. So we got to come up with some kind of solution.
Yeah, so two things that came up in this conversation, and very good recommendations, by the way. I love it, because that's a holistic approach. That's not somebody saying, hey, government, do this for us or do this for us. That's a holistic approach, how everybody can get involved. And honestly, if you talk about crime in our city, you got to have the conversation in that manner. So I want to set a hard line, because I have to always do this to talk about, there's a difference between state-sponsored violence, when law enforcement is doing things to the black community, and violence that we see, within our neighborhoods. And having that conversation, it's difficult for me because, we're paying a lot of attention to this, but also in the background, I keep replaying the voices of the parents that I talk to who've lost kids, or whose 10-month-old baby was shot, and I'm trying to figure out how to strike a balance with so much time and so much bandwidth on how to make sure that doesn't happen to another 10-month-old parents, and how to keep the community safe. But the tie between it all is that if law enforcement doesn't have a connection to the community, then law enforcement can't respond oftentimes to those situations. And let me elaborate a little bit more on that. We had a double homicide over in Moortown where some people got into it at a party, or a get-together. Regardless, when a young man or a young woman leaves their house with a weapon, and somebody sees it, a mother sees it, an aunt sees it, a lot of these people aren't living at home. You look, whenever I'm looking at the facts of these cases, these people aren't living at home by themselves. There's somebody in that home. There's somebody who saw something on the internet. A lot of times this goes on social media, and they see somebody threaten a life or say, hey, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. Well, if they don't first value human life enough to say, hey, y'all need to stop themselves, or they say, hey, it's not my place, this is a law enforcement matter, and if they don't have the confidence and trust in Shreveport Police Department to report it, then these situations spiral out of control. So that's why it has to be so holistic, and that trust has to be there amongst each other. But we have to be consistent. If we value life, we gotta value life across the board. We have to be consistent. Like I said, I'm really trying my best to strike that balance on bringing attention to the crime in our city while dealing with this crisis as well. But it takes all of us to do it. So the churches, absolutely. If we can get more pastors involved to walk those streets and go out and do a lot of outreach. At this point, it takes a lot of outreach. We know the demographics of the church are getting a bit older. A lot of the younger people are stepping away. Do some outreach, go and grab them, pull them back in. Community organizations that are concerned, hey, do some outreach. When an analogy, when the coronavirus, when we realized that it was wreaking havoc disproportionately on minority neighborhoods, what we did was we went to the leadership in those neighborhoods and said, we need you. We need you to speak out. If they're not listening to me, the mayor, if they're not listening to, the sheriff or whoever, then hey, maybe they'll listen to their mom or their aunt or their pastor. So we need everybody to be involved with this. So thank you so much for the recommendations. I stand with NAACP on all of it. However, we can stop it.
Good morning. I'm going to take this off as well. My name is Michael Lafitte. I represent the NAACP here in Shreveport. The biggest thing that we have here in Shreveport, and when it comes to law enforcement, and not only Shreveport, throughout this nation, is distrust. Black folks don't trust the police. I mean, that's just the best way to put it. There's a history between our community and law enforcement. And that history with our community and law enforcement does not have a good ending. So how do we fix this? You can't fix the process until you have a time of healing. So how do you heal doing something that's continuously happening? as soon as we feel better about one situation, we may be getting a little closer to members of law enforcement, then comes something else. Then comes another thing. In this city right here alone, this is one of the greatest cities in America. I live here, I rear children here. But we've got to get on the bandwagon. We can start small things. We can start small things. I believe that law enforcement needs to be more present in the community. And what I mean by that is, if little Johnny gets pulled over, you hadn't seen a police officer all day. But Johnny gets pulled over, now you got 12 cars. Well, where these 12 cars come from? Where have these officers been the entire time? Most times when you ride around in the African-American community, you're gonna see officers parked under the shade tree, doing something. Or, as we like to say, doing absolutely nothing. There has to be a tone of respect that goes towards, from law enforcement, that comes over to our community. And I honestly believe that if the respect is given from their side, we'll in turn give that respect to them as well. It's the little things. It's the little things. There's so many people in this city that are taking small steps to bring us closer to law enforcement, to bring us closer to government entities. But every time we get closer and we want to do things with the government, or we want to do things with law enforcement, something happens that pushes us away. So we've just got to come to a way to where we can mend, begin, heal, and I believe things will change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We and that you hear this talk about a bad apple in police departments, and honestly, like you said, one incident can have a ripple effect across the entire department, and it's so important to try to prevent those one incidents. But like, in understanding the context of it all, if you have an elected official that is committed to changing, the police department's direction, committed to community-oriented policing, and if you have a police chief that's committed to it, that says, hey, I'm gonna change the policy on the books tonight. Heck, you can even have a lawmaker that says, I'm gonna change the law. But it takes culture years to change. Years and years to change. In Louisiana, we have a tenured-based promotion system for law enforcement, not a merit-based promotion system, meaning the longer you stay, you're gonna get promoted, you'll take a test, and you'll get promoted. So there's a lot of law enforcement officials that have been on the force for 20, 30 years. So we're paying attention to the moment, and what I'm saying, but then these incidents will pop up and people will say, oh man, something's inconsistent. The mayor and the police chief said this, but we keep having these incidents pop up. We gotta understand, like I said, there is a culture that we are pushing back against that's very much present, and I would be a lie to say it didn't exist. If any leadership of the police department or any law enforcement had said that culture was not there and we were changing, trying to get better with our times, it wouldn't be honest. So it takes time to do this, but again, I am committed to doing it. And holding your elected officials accountable, holding leadership accountable, again, watching the entire process, every elected official, understanding the law, that helps us get there. But you're 100% right about that. I have seen everything you said. That's why we've encouraged our police officers to get out of their cars, knock on doors, get to know the people in the neighborhoods that they're controlling. Yeah, 100%.
Good morning. I'm Belinda Robertson, Director of YWCA of Northwest Louisiana. And first I want to say to our NAACP partners in the community that even with our recent funding cuts, the YWCA has a trauma-informed teen leadership program that we provide to the community. We deal with issues like racism, bullying, sex trafficking, and suicide. We've conducted race and conversation in congregations. We also have the Dialogue on Race program, which we are revamping the program to gear it towards young adults. So if you call me, or I will call you, we are here to help with the teens. We don't have a whole lot of funding, but we will do everything we can to step in and be of assistance to our community. Secondly, I'm going to piggyback off of what John Ratcliffe said. Dialogue on Race was founded by YWCA in Baton Rouge back 20 years ago by Maxine Crump, who is now the CEO of the standalone organization. It's a 6-week series that leads the 15 community members or less, it's a small group, through an educational process for the elimination of racism. Now, through the pandemic, it has kind of changed things, and we now offer it virtually. So you can actually go online to Dialogue on Race Louisiana and register for an online course, but you also can call on YWCA and participate in our courses at YWCA. The community has, in addition to issues of trust, problems with hope for change. We've had the same policing problems that have gone on, and it seems as though things aren't changing. It seems as though what we are feeling is that things are being done and people get away with it. It goes to court, it's wiped off, and nothing happens. So what we want to know is what real change is going to happen. In addition to policing, our community, there's a fear of black people. People are afraid of black people. They're afraid especially of black men. And some people feel as though they can call the police on black people, black men, when they haven't really committed a crime. While we are doing dialogue on race in small groups, is there anything that the city is doing to help out with those calls that come in that are unwarranted?
I don't know the particular policy, and I don't know of any particular incidents off the top of my head with false reporting, particularly on black men. I know I'm familiar with the case of New York City where the Christian Cooper, the bird watcher, somebody called police on him saying that they were attacking him. So I'm not saying that this doesn't happen by any means. I'm not familiar with any particular cases. But I will say with this, I am a black man. I'm not always wearing a suit and tie. I have been profiled before. I've, heard racial slurs have been thrown my way. I've gone through everything that a black man in America can go through. So I get that, and I'm going to. Yeah, I get that, and so I'm gonna again do. If there is an instance that I'm aware of, I'm gonna make sure and do everything I can to make sure that whatever repercussions is there that is taken, because we can't have that, right? You talked about officers doing things and getting off. Again, I will tell you that has very much happened in the past. That it has happened, but again, I would ask people to study like over the last year and a half, the incidents of excessive force and what's happened to those officers. So that is changing. Them getting off, but roadblocks to instances where the community might be in disagreement of the outcome are oftentimes, again, what the law says, what the Civil Service Board decided. Those are backstops that I can't, no matter how I feel about something, that we can't push through. But again, as society as a whole, we can change those things and we can put pressure on other parts of the system.
Okay. Well, thank you for your leadership.
Of course, thank you. I think they're about to go. Oh, okay, yeah.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to all others who are here. Thank you for your comments and your concerns. I don't really know what I want to say in total, so let me just
It's
two
a lot
things.
to say.
It's just maybe two things. I have an issue with the fact that I think that even when I heard you say, I use this as an example, we bring up what churches are doing and not doing they should do. I don't want to get on that because I'll be here all day with that, because everybody tells you what they should do when they're not doing anything, right? But here's the key. For me, it's institutions that people reject. And the church has become, unfortunately, an institution when I think she was born to be a movement. She's become, in many instances, an institution. And I think people reject the notions of institutions. They have no more confidence in government than they have in church. I mean, because they're institutions. People look for things that are going to help change something and not maintain what I think to be perceived as a status quo. So part of what I say is, I was sharing with a friend just the other day that I don't know how I feel about the race commission. in that, I'm kind of embarrassed in 2020 that, I can say we live in a city where we need a race commission, You would think we were way beyond it, but we're not. And not just we, the United States is not, quite frankly. So it's not just Shreveport, but you would think we were beyond that. And so I keep asking myself, well, what's the issue? What's the problem? And I think very often we try to change it institutionally. I think when you got to find models around the city. I mean, I happen to participate in a few that I think that work. This group, To Win, that does the breakfast once a month, nobody sanctioned that. It's people, black and white, who got together, who, even in some hard conversations, decided to keep coming back to the table. And, sometimes I stopped going. At one point, I stopped going because I felt like they weren't being serious enough. Everybody was placating each other. But it's a process, and you got to kind of get to work through it. I worked with Northwest Louisiana Interfaith for the last 20 years, and doing work together with people who are Jewish, who are Muslim, who are black, who are white, who are straight, gay, whatever. But it's not engineered by anybody except the people who are part of it. And so I think looking for solutions from institutions is a thing that is something that's not as effective as when the community decides she wants to create her own institutions. When the community, let's talk about, because unfortunately we still have to use modifiers. So I don't know where the lines are for the black community. More importantly, I don't know where the lines are for the white community. I don't know who the white community leaders are. Because they always say the black community leaders, you either got to be the president of the NAACP or a preacher or something, you're a leader. I don't know who the white leaders are, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, we have these modifiers. And so we start talking about this black community and the white community, black church, the white church, all of these things. And what's confusing to me is in all of this, people are rejecting these institutions. Folks have to decide to get together. You can't engineer friendships. Those are things folks have to be involved. That's why Sunday, which is a voluntary day, versus a school system, Monday through Friday, when you're forced to integrate and you got to go to school and you can go different places. But when you go to places you choose, watch how people gather when they choose to gather voluntarily or volitionally. And so I think you got to start working through that from that perspective and don't see the city as a failure in being able to get that done because it's really not the city's job. Yeah. But when it comes to policing, again, that's a state issue. That's the public's issue, and I think we got a lot to do. We've heard people talk about it today, but if we don't start with building trust and legitimacy, then it's a waste of time because there is no trust and legitimacy, and that's not against the officers. They're in a system. Once they're sworn to do it, they're in a system. It's not even black and white. Because if you don't change the culture, and if you don't, you said it yourself, you can put policies and procedures. Chief White don't want to see you put policies and procedures in place, but customs and practice eat policies and procedures for lunch. I mean, it's what we do around here. It's the culture, and so we have to figure out how we stand up better, trust and legitimacy, how we do something about policy and oversight. We always, I don't know that we don't have the courage to do that as much as it is the laws tie our hands. So sometimes I want to say to people who come, even if we gotta put our demonstration energy in the right places. Because if you just come down and talk to the mayor, your hands tied. We got to be talking to state legislators. That's where law is made. What the council does, state and federal, and look at what we're up against when we look at the composition of our Louisiana legislature and our United States Congress. We're up against it, and I don't know if we think we're winning some battles because we in cities where we got some presumed leadership that may think like us or look like us. But the truth is, the larger it gets and the higher we go up, we're up against it. And so I really think we got to find out ways to save communities. And as we save communities, we begin to save the entire city. But we have to know that the investment is there and that the priority is there. And then when folks we pay, again, public servants, I think you said it, they got to come out with a warrior. They can't come out with a warrior mentality. They got to come out with a guardian mentality. And a lot of that is about, again, policy oversight, trust and legitimacy, training and education. We can't train police officers like soldiers and then expect them to act like servants instead of combatants. And so at the end of the day, we got a lot to do as it relates to how we began to train and educate them. And Chief Whitehorn or other folks can speak to this, but I think that we have police officers who are trained to know how to wrestle, to know how to shoot, to know how to fight, but not necessarily know how to de-escalate, not how to manage conflict, how to get to a place early enough where it's not an emergency and be able to deal with a situation. So there's a lot of policy things that we have to put in place, but also I think we got to change the culture, and sometimes you got to do some extreme things to change culture, because as you said, it takes a long time to change culture. And so, so when people talk about police review boards and all those things, those are extreme things, but sometimes those are the things it takes to change culture, because nothing changes if nothing changes.
Absolutely. I'm gonna steal a word from you. You just said a whole bunch. I'm gonna steal a word from you though of panacea. You say it a lot in your sermons, but with these institutions, oftentimes they look at the public side as the panacea for all. And I tell people early on, like, we can't legislate morality. So I don't care if you white clergy or black clergy. I tell the clergy, like, I need you. The clergy is much better at touching hearts and minds than government has ever been. So with that absence and this holistic approach, then we're always going to be beating our heads against the wall if you want, the mayor to be dictating the morality of the city. 100%. In talking about, doing extreme things to change the culture, 100%. But a lot of times, like, that law stops you dead whenever you were trying to do those extreme things. So you can only do so much.
Good morning, Mayor, and everyone assembled. And I guess I can echo the sentiments of everybody here in thanking you and expressing our appreciation for giving us this forum to share with you our thoughts, our feelings, our ideas on how to change race relations and whatnot. And I think, just personally, I think it's not realistic in my standpoint to come here and talk to the mayor about changing race, because I don't think that's within your power and on your job description. It wasn't even on your platform. So we don't expect that. But Pastor Jackson, everybody has made some very valid points on this structure. But something the pastor said that resonates with me, and I was sitting there thinking about, and is that this issue of trust in what people see when they drive up, when they perceive or see people that they don't know, and they automatically have these perceptions of people based on what they see. As a black man, I was listening to Ricky Smiley this morning, and he talks about how every time the police gets behind him, or if he sees the police, how nervous he gets. I do too. I'm an educated African American, 2 degrees. I try to wear, when I come downtown, I try to wear a suit because I don't want folk to be asking me, can they help me? Because I've had that happen to me before. I came down in a sweatshirt on the day off and with a baseball cap on, and everybody was like, "Can I help you, sir?" Because they automatically think there's something wrong with me, and then my counterpart, a white gentleman, can be wearing the same outfit, and they see them as having the authority to be there, and we have to deal with that because of what we've been taught all of our lives, especially in the South. I come from a town, East Carroll Parish, Lake Providence, Louisiana, 70% African American. Most of my experience has been all black. So that's basically all I've known till I got outside of Lake Providence and started dealing. I didn't even know white folk and black folk dealt with each other. The only relationship that I understood was employee and employer, boss and worker. That's the only experience we had other than summer baseball. And of course, these perceptions are taught from and throughout institutions. I've taken 2 classes on race, one some 20 years ago and one recently with the dialogue on race. When I took it in my 20s, it was a learning experience. When I took it with the dialogue on race, I found that we had African American and whites in there all on the same page. And I'm like, okay, do you all understand that race is an institution and it's perpetuated by institutions like the media, and it's perpetuated so that even African Americans are scared of black people. Even African Americans, the first chance we get, the first time we make enough money, we trying to move away from our own people. So to deal with this, and I'm finna be quiet because I got to go and I don't want to talk too long. To deal with this race from a realistic perspective, you have to change perception and change the way we talk, all the way down from when we start at school, when we take a pledge to allegiance to the flag, till we start singing songs like "I Wish I Was in Dixie," from all of those things that we're socialized in this culture, that leads us to grow up and have this mistrust. And if we as African Americans mistrust each other, how much more will white people mistrust African Americans just on sight? So that culture has to change, a re-education, if you will, of not just the African American, but of America, and to see that just because I'm African American don't mean I'm criminal. I want the same thing that anybody else wants. I want security. I want safety for my family. I want to be able to make a fair living, equal pay for equal work. I want all the things that anybody else wants. And then on the flip side, I can't feel that just because that's a white person that they racist than that, but they are impacted or infected by what they're in. If you walk in a house, and if you've been in a house for so long that stinks, you don't even realize it. But somebody walks in and say, "What's that smell?" I mean, you've been conditioned, and it doesn't even bother you anymore. But it takes folk from other vantage pointing out the things that we hadn't been able to see forever. Yeah. So for me to get up here and say, give you some suggestions, I don't have any, because you don't have the power to do anything I would suggest. Yeah. But to begin this discussion about how we turn the tide, we have to begin to get to really know each other, begin to build this trust, and as for police officers, they ought to, more than just ride, they ought to, if they see kids out, and if they're white cops, black cops, whatever, get out the car and talk to them, learn their name, and watch them grow up. So when you see them on the street, now you see somebody that you know, and not just a suspect. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
You said a whole lot too. I'll say this: institutions, and one that I'm leading an institution myself, and us losing faith in our institutions. Institutions are only as powerful as the people around them allow them to be. So that we don't have the will to make institutions look and be what we want them to be, then of course we're going to start to fade away from them. But Mr. Dixon brought up a great point about being pulled over by the police officers. I'm born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. I get nervous as well when I'm pulled. I'm a black man. I get nervous as well when I'm pulled over by police officers. And I talked about this actually when I made the selection for police chief. I grew up in Cedar Grove, but I went to school at Arthur Circle. So I grew up in a black neighborhood, and I took a bus to go to a predominantly white school, and I did that. So I learned early on that there were kind of different sides of the tracks here in Shreveport. This wasn't anything that I did. I was born into this system. But I think something that gave me a vantage point that some people in this community find it peculiar, some people might call it leadership, etc., was that I went away for some time. And I saw some different areas of America. And not saying there are more perfect places in America by any means, but I think structural racism takes on different shapes and faces in other places. So when I did come back to Shreveport, in the analogy that Aaron used, and I saw racism, I said, wait, it stinks in here. So I was not afraid to talk about those things very early on in my administration. And he said, hey, it wasn't even a part of your platform. Well, now it is, because it's so pervasive. It affects us economically. It affects us education-wise. It affects our just civility, period. Like, it is so pervasive. And in order to uplift Shreveport and push Shreveport in the right direction, you got to deal with it. We have to deal with it.
Thank you again for this forum. It's been great. As we look for solutions, one thing that I know that's going to come back up is community substations for the police. So number one, if we do enact substations, I know we're in a financial crisis right now, so it is hard to find money for the body cameras, but I feel strongly that substations work, putting those in the communities for policing. Where does the city of Shreveport stand with that? And how do we make sure that when we do have substations, that the right police officers are in those substations?
Yeah, yeah. I've been extremely vocal about having substations. Some people put up competing data about substations are ineffective with decreasing crime, but something that's not controversial at all is that substations do improve relationships between the neighborhoods and those the police departments. So I'm 100% behind substations, and I'm going to continue to push that and find very innovative ways to get that done during this term. As far as the police officers that are in those substations, there's been, even in this conversation, we talked about training. Again, a lot of people don't know about post-training. Police officers' standardization training is also dictated at the state level. We can add to that, but again, you're talking about academies that are a certain amount of time, certain amount of things have to be put into that curriculum, and certain amount of things have to be approved by that curriculum. So again, I don't have plenary control over it all. I don't have complete control over all the training that our officers go into. So, and then even if what you learn in the academy, I don't want that to be the only training that our officers are getting. I want there to be constant touch points on being a guardian, on serving and protecting. I don't want them to leave the academy, even if the academy was all kumbaya, de-escalation, et cetera, but then they got into a force where the culture was, hey, beat people over the heads. It doesn't work. So it got to be a life cycle with our police officers, and again, we are committed to doing it.
Perfect. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a final comment about change and perception. Change is in order, and I applaud you for being on the front line of change. I know you started this before the recent racial unrest. It's also in order for the banking system, our housing system, our healthcare system, and our educational system, as well as any other employers that are out there. Does the city work with any of these other systems to talk at a higher level about change? Because I know police are on the front, so we get to see that. But all the behind the scenes change that need to happen, does the city do anything with any of these others to talk about change?
All the time. And I'm so happy somebody brought up economics, because that is inextricably linked to the crime in our city. Crime, if you did a map of poverty in our city, it would just completely overlap. So there has to be a conversation about economics in it all. And what I can control from my institution, last year I boasted about the fact that we had the highest participation in our Fair Share program with disadvantaged businesses, minority businesses in Shreveport history, since it's been documented. And I said that this is critical, because in order for us to make, our neighborhood safer, you got to make sure that they have resources. You got to make sure that adequate housing is there. You got to make sure that adequate education is there, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how you drive down crime. It's a holistic approach again. So yeah, we have conversations all the time. I talk to Superintendent Gorey all the time about our school system, and he's implementing a lot of changes to make things more equitable. We have a very disparate school system, as you all know. He's trying to implement changes there. But also on the banking front, I've been in talks. I've been actually talking to the Cattle Commission and various other agencies on getting minority banks in the community to try to eat away at a lot of the payday loans, the predatory payday loans that we see. And I'm committed to doing that as well. But again, when trying to do all these things and do the holistic approach, you can only do a certain amount of things at a time. So if any other people, institutions, et cetera, want to help with this, help us push this, we're all about it. We'll get there even faster.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your convening this town hall. It's something that's definitely needed here in the city of Shreveport. I just want to ask a quick question. Is there anyone in this room who doesn't feel that there's a race, that there's something different in race in the city of Shreveport than maybe some other places? If you think we are a community where we have resolved race, raise your hand. So, And so the second part I want to say is that we have to understand that race is a social construct. I talk to sometimes my white brothers and sisters. There are certain radio stations here that talk about other ethnic communities always making race an issue. Well, race as a construct didn't happen in America until the late 1600s, early 1700s. Prior to that, there was no such thing as a white man, black man, red man, brown man. People were just human beings, you know, middle class, you were the elite, that sort of thing. And so as a result, there's a social construct in America, and when we talk about racism, we're not talking about race prejudice, meaning somebody don't like you big because the way you colored or that sort of thing. But if you look at the word racism, the base of the word is race. So when people came to America, it was not to escape political persecution from where they came from, although that's been the propaganda. It was to collect resources and to come over and gain as many resources as possible and extract it from as many people as you can. So in 2020, in February of this year, the mayor came to what we do is the State of Black Shreveport on an annual basis. He simply stated a contrast between economic resources in one part of town and economic resources in another sort of part of town. And that was a particular radio station that just took it and just went. You would have thought that there was nothing racist or ever happened in the city of Shreveport by the comments that were done now. And so the point I'm driving is that in this community, until we get to a point where we're comfortable, you can't resolve a problem until you realize there's a problem that exists. Until people feel comfortable with saying, well, we got a racial problem. And then putting the people in the room that need to hear the conversation. Oftentimes we do the two-win thing on a monthly basis, and I know Pastor Jackson alluded to is that what we need to do with that group, let me back up. What that group has done has started voluntarily meeting and discussing the issues. Now it's time to go to the next level. I often tell the group, I'm not so much concerned about the race prejudice as much as I'm concerned about the institutional constructs that impede the progress of ethnic blacks or other people in the ethnic community. Because if I'm born white in America, I'm born white with privilege. And if I'm born with some privilege, I don't intend to give that up. And so the way we work around this thing as it relates to race is that first we got to feel comfortable saying there is a problem, and then assembling people in the room who's coming in the room not with talking points, but with resolutions and saying that yes, that is a problem, this is what we need to do. And until we can have that open conversation, because there's a tendency, if you speak truth to power, you're speaking something that's real, then like the big deal they made about you back in March, when only what you were conveying to people were realistic statistics that are true and have persisted for the last 100 years. So I just think in our conversation, in our dialogue, when we talked about institutions earlier, then there needs to be groups of people who recognize the problem and are willing to speak collectively as a group to whatever institution they feel is conveying these things upon us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll say, those comments and even previous comments that I've made about race, people will get up in arms about them and be like, oh, why are you doing this? And even people will accuse you of being racist for talking about race. But again, until we're comfortable having the conversation, we're going to have moments like what we saw in Minneapolis that is now spread around the country. You bottle these things up because you don't talk about them for so long, and then you get an explosion. That's rocked L.A., D.C., in New Orleans, and it's here, you name it. So, like I said, I'm not going to be one to be fearful on talking about these issues because I've noticed how pervasive it is in our community and how much it hurts our community. At this point, I'm almost going so far to say that racism itself is one of the heaviest weights on our community. And people talk about crime, you can talk about economic development, et cetera, but racism is intertwined in all of it. So we have to be more comfortable talking about these things. And again, when people are throwing out, and I've talked about education already today, but another thing we really need to educate ourselves on is when having a conversation about race or somebody brings up race, identifying a productive conversation versus identifying somebody who is race baiting or waving the flames and trying to get, because there is a lot of people that profit off of our division in this city as well. a lot of people. So that's another part of education that we need to all go through, and I myself am still learning. It's some people that I very much thought were allies and supporters and wanted to get the right things, and at the end of the day, you look at it 2 times, 3 times, and you're like, wait a minute, this person is actually benefiting off the divisiveness of our city. We gotta very much make sure we have an eye for that to try to look at those people that's trying to look at the whole, not just themselves. So I wanted to point that out as well. John, go ahead.
Yeah, just to walk through a particular kind of situation, and some of this has been said before, but let me just kind of hopefully bring it together a little bit. If you have a policeman, policewoman who commits some misconduct, particularly if everybody knows that happened by video or whatever, that's part of the institutional problem, but the really fundamental thing, I think, and this really addresses itself to the bad apple part of bad apple argument, just a bunch of bad apples. Mm-hmm. Well, somehow the bad apples don't get out of the police department. I mean, they're still in the police department, and what you've got there, and there are analogies to this in other areas besides policing, but what you've got there is the failure of the institution to correct itself. And then you look outside the police department to the court system, which also has the authority to go in and do something about that, and they don't do anything about it. And then you got so that's an institution that has failed. And then when you were as you were talking earlier, there are laws that kind of bind us about what we can do, even though it's to the layperson it's obvious what to do. Then that's the piece of the institution that needs to be corrected. And I'm give that example as the kind of thing we talk about in dialogue on race is where we don't just look at this individual who's done something bad, but what is in the institutions and can we identify what set that up and what keeps it happening.
Again, I would encourage everybody, I want to talk about the Civil Service Board a little bit. That's the board that handles police misconduct, since it's top of the mind for us today. The Civil Service Board is composed of 9 members. Shreveport is unique. We're the only city in Louisiana where we have 9 members. 5 of which are civilians, 4 of which are uniformed personnel, 2 police officers, 2 firemen. Of the 5 civilians, 1 appointment is from Susla, 1 appointment is from LSUS, and the mayor has 3 appointments. People talk about a citizens review board. Those 5 citizens, that is the citizens that are reviewing these cases on our behalf, and you should know. Look them up. I can go through my appointees off the top of my head. In talking about, bad officers that are reinstated, I would encourage you all to go and look at the records on how people on that board are voting. The uniformed personnel, again, even though they're considered civilians in this case, but look at how the uniformed personnel are voting in instances of excessive force. And I think that'll tell you a whole lot. And until you get, if the mayoral appointees or the people, regardless, until the kind of heart of that board is there to where they're going to uphold rightful terminations, then you're going to get, people going back. And even sometimes if procedures are wrong, the people can be rewarded with lawsuits. They can sue the city for terminating them or, So it's very important to understand that process and, again, know the people that's on those particular boards. Morning.
Thank you so much for having this. My mama said you should get some wet wipes for the mic just in case. But I hear what you're saying about the Civil Service Board. And in light of that, I wanted to ask you what would be your first 2 recommendations that are within your authority and power as mayor. But before I get into that, I wanted to address really quickly this whole idea of black on black crime being something that we have to leave the fight for injustice on police brutality and switch over to this black on black crime as if it's not interconnected. And as you say, crime and economics are very much go hand in hand. And in this nation, 700 people die from poverty every day, not from black on black crime. So I think it's really important to lift that up and to let folks know that when we fight police brutality, we also fight quote unquote, black on black crime, because the interlocking injustices of poverty and crime cannot be disconnected. So I want to encourage folks, don't allow that talking point to deflate this fight and this struggle.
And by the way, the reason why I do it is because I represent the public side. That's the reason why I do it. I don't want people to say, you know, oh, the mayor is trying to chastise the black community or anything like that. That's the reason why I make a very hard distinction. I'm not shirking my responsibilities and the accountability of me and my police officers whatsoever. That's the reason why I do it. But yeah, you're right. If you're not in this seat and you're, you know, you very much can do it. That's the reason why I often do it.
You know, to be honest with you, I typically hear that talking point from non-black communities when they see us coming, you know. And so, I see a lot of people get discouraged by that, like, oh yeah, but it's interconnected.
It is.
All of this is connected, so we have to continue. So I just wanted to kind of bring that in as an aside, but also I heard some concerning things about, because we're talking about police and excessive use of force, steroid use. And that as a possibility, it's kind of like an accelerant to possible police behavior when it comes to excessive use of force. And so just as a recommendation, looking at that as a possibility, is steroid use a problem? I think that's important. And then also, you know, yesterday we put forth a petition that had been created by a young lady named Haley for body cams. And so I wanted to get your take on that. It's gotten over 10,000 signatures now and moving toward 15,000. And I'd love to know your take on that and suggestions.
Committed to it, and honestly, it'll be happening very soon. Every council member has voiced support for it. I have voiced support for it. It's a matter of finding the funds. We are in a fiscal crisis, but even within this fiscal crisis, we were able to find the funds, but the federal government actually has funds for it. So we'd rather use those resources, federal government resources, than our own resources that goes towards paying our employees and providing city services, et cetera. So right now it's a matter of just, like I said, getting those federal funds. But we'll put out a timeline on that. Marcus Mitchell, the chief administrative officer for the police department, me and him are supposed to talk today. Sorry, CAA, chief administrative assistant for the police department. Me and him are supposed to talk about that today.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Well, we got any other questions for me? Ms. Grant, you wanna talk? Put you on the spot. Oh, okay. Sorry, Mr. White, I'm about to jump. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ferris. I'm sorry. I don't want Kendrick to beat me up.
Mr. Mayor, I hadn't really planned to say anything, but as I sat back there and I listened intently to the conversations that we're having, and I started taking a few notes even prior to some of the folks coming up to the mic. And I've been in law enforcement over 44 years. And I've been a member of a national organization that represents law enforcement for over 20 plus years. And that organization is NOBLE, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Leaders. Many of you have probably heard of it. But our motto is that we are the conscience of law enforcement. And so we have never been afraid to speak out. And we should all not be afraid to speak out against injustice. But when we talk about injustice, we're not just speaking about law enforcement. And so we have to be careful, because we've got hundreds of law enforcement officers out there every day that's doing the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons. We've got a few, just like in all parts of society, that's not doing those right things. And so we have to be careful that we don't paint everybody with the same brush. Similar to what they do in the black community, they paint everybody as bad. So we don't want to do that, but we do want to speak out against injustice. I've served on many committees. I've served on committees on building police community relations under Janet Reno when she was Attorney General. The 21st Century Policing Report that was done under President Obama. Oftentimes we put all of this, we construct all of this, and we push it out, and we have meetings such as this, and we check off the box. We've done it. We've talked about it. We feel good. that's about as far as it goes sometimes. I heard, I had made a note about legitimacy, Pastor, and I heard Pastor Jackson talk about legitimacy. Legitimacy equals commitment. And people are looking at us. They're watching us live on Facebook. Our legitimacy is going to be based on the commitment that leaves this place and how we construct what we do forward. And so I encourage everybody, I'm willing to participate and help, but it has to be a commitment. You know, I'm watching this current protest movement. I had a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine, and we were talking about this movement looks different. It feels different. You know, I was around during the civil rights. We had a lot of white folks and black folks joining together to fight against the injustice that was taking place. This movement feels even more different. I've never seen this many white folks out marching with black folk, legitimately showing concern. This is our time to make a difference. And so I'm just encouraged at what I see, but it's got to be peaceful. We got some folks out there that are going to try to make it difficult. We've got several rallies coming up this weekend, 3 in particular. And there's going to be some folks out there that's going to try to make it difficult for folks like Amari to have those peaceful protests. And we got to speak out against that. We got to make sure that these protests continue, do what needs to be done, but we got to make sure that they're peaceful. You know, we often, I think you mentioned it too, talking about culture. We talk about, we got to change folks' minds. We got to change the mindset, when really we ought to be focusing on the heart. We can change your mindset, but if we hadn't changed your heart, that implicit bias piece is still there. And it will show at some point. And so unless we can work on that heart set, we're still, I think, missing part of what the solution requires. And I think I've covered everything that I was just jotting down. Yeah. I've probably got a lot more to say, yeah. But we've got some other meetings I know we got, and I know these folks are probably getting tired too. But I just felt compelled to come up here, yeah, and make a few statements based on the observation.
I appreciate it, Chief. You've been doing law enforcement for a long time. I'll wait. I'll let Pastor Jackson, then I'll make a concluding remark, and we can. Yeah.
I keep calling him Chief. I want to know I'm not CAO.
Chief Administrative Officer.
Yeah.
I still call him Chief as well. Yeah.
Let me say this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for this, and this is my final comment. The Chief said something a minute ago. I said I wouldn't touch that mic. The Chief said something just a moment ago about implicit bias. Somebody had asked about what was in the purview. A part of, I'm not sure, and y'all can tell me whether or not legally we have the capacity. I have always been a believer that every police officer, sometimes every public servant, but certainly since it's such a high profile role, that every police officer needs 2 things. One, an implicit bias test, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to, it's not punitive, because everybody has implicit biases. And from that implicit bias profile, okay, I'll call it a profile, then let's make smart assignments based on those profiles. Because if there's an African-American police officer who happens to be a female, let's say, who has an implicit bias because of something historical against African-American men, then let's be sure we keep an eye out for a track record. If there is an if there is a white male who has an implicit bias against African-American males or females, let's say, well, let's put him on a patrol that doesn't include Moortown or something. So it helps us make educated decisions without denying the fact that all of us got something messed up in us and implicit biases. We all bring that to us. That's the first thing. And my question is whether or not y'all can make that happen from a training perspective.
Mm-hmm.
As a requirement, it's a tool to me rather than a punishment. That's the first thing. Second thing is, what are we doing about officer wellness? Because there is a need for therapy. I don't understand. I talked to a young police officer who's a church member, and we talk quite a bit, and we talk about shifts, back to back, how you put people on shifts. And in the course of an 8-hour day, let's say, an 8-hour shift, in the first hour, that person could be confronted with 3 traumatic incidents in the matter of, let's just say, the first half of that day. And to act as if police, that training doesn't make them subhuman or hyperhuman. They still are human beings, and those things are traumatic. And the fact that they carry that trauma to the next thing is something we have to seriously talk about. Decompression therapy and things that the officers need in order to better serve and to better protect the citizens of the city of Shreveport. And I think we got to think about that. And what we should brag about when we start talking about our training is how we use intelligence to put people in places. And again, that tool will help. And then how we take care of the people who take care of us. Yeah. And if we did a better job of that, we might understand that there's some things that's in them that's sometimes not just about race only, but it could be about race too. But sometimes it's not just about race only. Sometimes they've been overworked, and whoever is in that car is in trouble when it relates to the attitude they're gonna have and those kind of things. When they are 15 minutes away from going home, and you acting a fool when they're getting ready to get off, So I really think we need to think about self-care, wellness for officers as well, and think about them mentally as well.
No, I agree. So, and I'll answer. I'll kind of respond to that and then make some concluding remarks. One, I'm all about data, quantitative and qualitative. If we can administer an exam like that. I'll talk to HR about how that could look as well. And as far as taking care of our officers on the mental health side, I will tell you, we do not do a good job of it. Not that we don't make resources available, but we don't do a good job of it because often there is a stigma. So in what I've garnered from talking to my officers often about the shifts that Pastor Jackson just described, these very traumatic shifts, is that they don't actually see a therapist or talk to anyone unless there is a very traumatic event, like a shooting event or something, where they see, a child that, something bad has happened to. And that being reactive isn't always the best thing, because oftentimes, again, it's when things have boiled over, when you actually get the help that you need, that could have leveled you out and made you stronger going on to that shift, and that's just not the right way. So I've talked to Chief Raymond about that, coming up with some better ways on destigmatizing, getting help as a police officer and making those resources even more readily available. So we don't. In the kind of concluding remark, we're talking about police misconduct, excessive force a lot today. That's been the topic of conversation. But Chief Whitehorn reminded me of some things that I definitely need to include in here. Our officers, a majority of them are phenomenal people that signed up for the police department for the right reasons. Same with the firemen. Phenomenal people. Live in the same exact neighborhoods you all do. Everybody's concerned. Probably kids play, softball with your kids, you name it. And we do owe them, we do need to treat them well with all that we ask of them. And we ask a lot of them. We often are asking them to be counselors when they're in the neighborhood, therapists when they're in the neighborhood, parents when they're in the neighborhood, you name it. So I just want to say, a majority are heroes in our community. I've awarded so many of our first responders since I've been sitting at this dais for outstanding things that, me or you probably couldn't even imagine them doing. They go out there and work hard every single day, and I don't want this conversation, I don't want that to be lost in this conversation. I know what the point at hand is, but I don't want that to be lost in this conversation on all those selfless people that are going out there every day to keep us safe. So I'm very, very grateful for them, and also very, very grateful to you all, to this community, and I owe it to everyone to keep you safe, whether you're in uniform or you're not in uniform. So the only way we get there is if we work together, we continue to stay together, and we continue to work on our own hearts to make sure that we're in the right place. So I'll wrap it up with that. Thank y'all so much. I appreciate the time. Appreciate it, y'all.
This is good.